In my last video, we talked about Minerva McGonagall, her life from birth until 1980. We're now going to pick up the story with the boy who lived. In 1981, baby Harry defeated Lord Voldemort in his Godric Hollow's house after his parents Lily and James were struck down and murdered by Voldemort himself. The fall of Voldemort ultimately ended the war, and his followers were arrested. Those who weren't escaped into hiding. Minerva McGonagall, at that point, then travelled to Surrey and spent the entire day observing the Dursley family. She was seeing if they were capable of looking after Harry. They were his only living relatives, as obviously we know his parents were now dead, having protected Harry in their final moments. She was horrified by what she saw. They were the complete opposite to Lily and James. She was there along with Hagrid when Dumbledore placed Harry on the Dursleys' front door step, despite her objections to him being left with these muggles. She kept a close eye on Harry during his childhood, along with members of the Order of the Phoenix. As the First Wizarding War had ended, Minerva continued with her career at Hogwarts teaching Transfiguration, and it was around this time that Elphiston proposed every now and then. And after she learnt about Douglas's death, she eventually accepted this proposal. They had no children, but her nieces and nephews visited often. This was a period of great fulfilment for Minerva, and as we know, they lived in Hogsmeade, they had a home until her husband died, and then she sold that home and moved into Hogwarts full time. In 1991, friend of Dumbledore, Nicholas Flamel, we all know that name, had the Philosopher's Stone, and that, as we know, was keeping him alive. And this was then moved from his safe in Gringotts to Hogwarts for safekeeping. Minerva contributed to the fences set up around the magical artefact by transfigurating an enormous chess set and animating it to behave as a normal wizard's chess set would. Also in this year, Harry Potter, who Minerva had been watching over for many, many years, would start his first year at Hogwarts. McGonagall maintained her strict persona in regards to Harry Potter, but she wasn't above bending the rules for him, such as when she caught him flying a broom, unsupervised. Now Madam Hoot very much was thinking, anyone that does this, you're going to be expelled. McGonagall was like, no, this boy has a gift, let's put him on the Quidditch team. That's confusing for the other students, isn't it? Over the Christmas period, she attended the Christmas feast, received a kiss on the cheek from a very drunk Hagrid. Rather than admonish him, she instead giggled and turned red in the face. In the beginning of 1992, Minerva had to deal with Harry and Ron, who crashed Mr. Weasley's flying Ford Anglia into the Whomping Willow. This nearly exposed the Wizarding world. Minerva just let them off with a mere detention and letters to their family. But she didn't take any house points because Harry did point out that this actually happened before the school year had started, and that would be extremely unfair to punish them for that. Minerva found that quite amusing and had to suppress a smile at that point. Later on, Minerva was then present for the opening of the Chamber of Secrets. She had little liking or use for Lockhart, and by the end of the year was only one of the many staff who absolutely despised the man. For example, when he decorated the Great Hall in nauseatingly lurid pink hearts for Valentine's Day, she was observed to have a muscle twitching noticeably in her face. Later on, we know that Ginny was then taken into the Chamber of Secrets. When McGonagall received Mr. and Mrs. Weasley into her office, with Dumbledore, who had obviously returned at that point, she was astonished to see Ginny herself walk in, accompanied by a slime-covered Ron, Harry and Lockhart, the Sorting Hat, Dumbledore's Phoenix, and the Silver Sword of Godric Gryffindor. That must have been such a sight. Harry then explained that he and Ron had gone down to the Chamber of Secrets, having realised the mystery behind it, and just, slain the basilisk. Dumbledore declared, "The crisis is over," and told Minerva to go down to the kitchens and get a feast prepared. She then attended that with absolute joy. She was elated. Not only was the beast dead, but Lockhart was banished. He was gone. She was very happy. The summer of '93 saw the escape of Sirius Black from Azkaban, and at the beginning of that school year, Minerva had to deal with the effects the Dementors were having on her students, especially on Harry himself. At the start of that year, Minerva then demonstrated her animagus to that class. slightly surprised that they were very quiet and no one was applauding, which she was so used to having happen when she had turned into her cat. She asked what was going on, and Hermione said, "We've just had our first divination letter," at which point Minerva sighed and said, "Well, who's dying this year then?" Harry raised his hand. McGonagall assured him that every year Trelawney predicted a student was going to die. And actually, none of those had come true yet. At that point, she also showed a rare bit of her humour and said that if he did happen to die, then he's excused from handing his homework in. No doubt a way to relieve some of that tension and stress that Harry was obviously feeling that time. Later in the year, Minerva was then summoned to Gryffindor because Ron claimed he had been attacked by none other than Sirius Black. She initially dismissed him, as Black could not have possibly got in to Gryffindor Tower without the password. Now, she was completely unaware that Crookshanks had found a list of passwords and had given it to Sirius. McGonagall was then rendered speechless when the new guardian of the tower, Sir Cadogan, confirmed that he had actually let him in because he had the passwords and they were written down. Like, what's he to do? I'm a little bit sad that that character wasn't in the films because he's so funny in the books. I think he would have been a great little side character to have in the films, but there we go. Neville then had to admit that he was the one who had written the passwords down. McGonagall then banned him from going to Hogsmeade the rest of the year, gave him detention, and he was forbade from knowing the password. He often had to wait outside Gryffindor Tower for someone to come back and let him in. Sometimes he could be there hours. His grandmother was also written to, and as a result of this, he had a howler at breakfast. Don't envy him there. Following the destruction of his Nimbus 2000, Harry received a firebolt, but he didn't know who from. McGonagall confiscated it to be examined, doing lots of tests to make sure it doesn't have any dark magic inside, because she believed that it had been sent by Sirius Black, which it had been, and then thought it was lethally cursed, which it wasn't. This actually caused Harry and Hermione to have an argument because Hermione alerted McGonagall about this new broomstick that had appeared. It was returned to him later on, having been declared safe. Now, during a Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, Malfoy, Goyle, Crabbe and Flint posed as Dementors to sabotage Harry's performance, only to get struck down when Harry's reflexes kicked in and he cast a Patronus curse. Utterly furious at this trickery from the boys, she deducted 50 points from Slytherin and all 4 of them received detention. In the autumn of 1994 is when the Triwizard Tournament happened. Minerva pleaded with Dumbledore and Crouch to withdraw Harry from the tournament, as it was highly dangerous, but withdrawing would go against the rules of the tournament, so Potter had to compete, as there was a binding magical contract in place. She attended the Yule Ball with Dumbledore. She also wore her hair down for the first time since Harry had started his education at Hogwarts. Minerva danced with Bagman and Dumbledore, among others. It was in the case of the former that Harry noticed Bagman kiss Minerva's hand once they finished dancing. She was instructed to guard Crouch Jr. after he revealed his part in the rebirth of Voldemort, but was unable to prevent the Dementor brought by Minister Fudge from giving the Deathly to the Dementor's kiss. Now, initially she was absolutely furious that Fudge had done this, and severely shaken from what she's witnessed and from seeing this horrible, horrible act. She lost it, and she screamed so much more than Harry had ever seen her do before. Once the Second Wisdom War had begun, Minerva actually joined the Order of the Phoenix this time round, and she spent much of the summer of 1995 doing work for the Order. She would come and go from 12 Grimmauld Place wearing Muggle clothing, so Muggle dresses and things like that. Harry thought it made her look quite odd because he wasn't used to seeing her outside of her robes. That sounds wrong. In something other than her robes. I'm going to skip forward a little bit into the Order of the Phoenix, and I'm actually going to skip quite far through that, mainly because a lot of the things that we know about Minerva already during that is there's not much more to add. However, when Umbridge became headmaster, she tried to evict Hagrid from the grounds, and Minerva wasn't having this. So she charged out of the castle, shouted at the Aurors to leave him alone. But before she could draw her wand, she was actually hit in the chest with 4 stunning spells, and this resulted in her having to be removed to St Mungo's Hospital for treatment. She didn't return to Hogwarts until after the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, and once she was released, she actually did need a walking stick for several days. Upon her return to the school, she gave the 6 students involved in the Battle of the Ministry 50 house points each for alerting everyone to the fact that you-know-who had in fact returned. She also watched with some happiness that Peeves chased Umbridge from the school, commenting she would have joined him in chasing Dolores away, but Peeves had actually stolen her walking stick. Moving on again a bit further. When Dumbledore was murdered, Minerva and the rest of the Hogwartsians, so the Hogwarts students and teachers, were stuck on the level below, having been prevented from passing on the stairs to reach them by a cursed barrier by the Death Eaters. When Snape arrived, he could actually get through, and this is because he had the Dark Mark and he just pushed past her. Minerva assumed that Snape, as her colleague, was merely rushing up the stairs to help, and no one tried to stop him. At some point, the roof part of where they were collapsed and it broke the barrier. Minerva and those who were still standing rushed forward to pursue anyone who had tried to escape, only for the dust to clear and for them to see Snape emerging with Draco, assuming they were running from the Death Eaters. Again, Minerva let them pass, thinking that, Death Eaters, I will go after them, you guys get out, I got this. She personally then chased off one of the Carrow twins, and Minerva sent them running for absolute cover, which I can completely believe. Once the intruders escaped the scene of the crime, Minerva was devastated to find out that Dumbledore, someone she'd known a long time, had actually died. At this point, Minerva assumed the role of Hogwarts head teacher. She also tried to comfort Harry around the fact that Dumbledore had just died, and she tried to encourage him to tell her, what were you actually doing with Dumbledore? Like, where were you going? What was he up to? But Harry wouldn't say anything because Dumbledore had confided in him and said it's just to be between the two of us. Eventually she was joined by Sprout, Flitwick and Slughorn, and then they proceeded to talk about the possible closure of Hogwarts and what they need to do for Dumbledore's funeral. Slughorn then announced the arrival of a delegation for the Ministry of Magic, and she gave Harry leave to vacate the office so she could actually receive these new arrivals in and inform them about what had happened. During this time, the Minister of Magic, now Rufus Scrimgeour, I'm gonna say, I probably got that wrong, allowed Minerva to put in place Dumbledore's last wish, which was to be buried on school grounds. As the war continued, McGonagall did stay at Hogwarts even when Voldemort took over. When Severus was appointed headmaster, and Alecto and Amicus Carrow were given free rein in the school, Minerva did everything she could to protect her students. The Rebel Alliance, Dumbledore's army, founded by the students, was reformed, and McGonagall helped keep their meetings secret. On May the 1st, 1998, Minerva was present when Potter, Granger and Weasley returned to Hogwarts in the middle of the night in search of Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. Realising that a battle was upon them, Minerva engaged Severus Snape, the headmaster at the time, in a fierce duel. While Snape did put up a good defence, McGonagall gained the upper hand quickly when Slughorn and Sprout arrived. Snape fled. Now severely outnumbered, McGonagall believed his escape was motivated by fear, called him a coward as he fled the school. Harry informed McGonagall of a quest that Dumbledore had left him. In respect for Dumbledore's wishes, she offered to hold Voldemort and his army back whilst Harry fulfilled his quest. To take advantage of chaos, she also ordered Filch to find Peeves and to bring him to her, in which she did. She ordered the evacuation of younger students through Hogshead, and Minerva then helped to fortify the castle against the coming attack with the assistance of her fellow teachers, Order members and even older students who had stayed behind to fight. When Pansy Parkinson suggested they take the deal offered to them by Voldemort, that their lives in exchange for Harry's, Minerva ordered the cowardly girl and all those not willing to fight to leave. She fought skillfully in the first part of the battle, during which she could have sworn she saw one of the statues that usually flanks the school's main gates dive-bombing a cluster of Death Eaters. She stood defiant in the lull and among many students in a crowd when Voldemort himself walked into the Hogwarts ground. It was only when she saw Harry's body being carried by Hagrid that she began to despair, letting out a scream terrible to anyone that heard it, equal to that of Ron, Hermione and Ginny's together. McGonagall's also present when Harry and Voldemort duelled for the final time. She and many others witnessed Voldemort's killing curse connect with Harry's disarming charm. Voldemort's curse was rebounded, signalling his final defeat at Harry's hands. She, along with everyone else in the Great Hall, hugged Harry in an uncharacteristic display of great emotion, being one of the first to reach Harry after Hermione, Ron and Ginny. This event signalled the end of the Second Wizarding War. Now, just to put that into context for people who haven't read the book, it's very different how Voldemort dies in the book as it is in the movie. So in the movies it's outside, in the book it's actually in the Great Hall, which is why it's saying everyone in the Great Hall. In the aftermath of the battle, McGonagall brought the winged boar statue's part in the battle to the attention of Flitwick. Flitwick thought it's an unlikely story because no one's charmed them, no one's enchanted them before. This then led to a long-standing disagreement between the two, who could not agree as to whether or not the winged boar statue had in fact participated in the Battle of Hogwarts. So that, guys, is the Battle of Hogwarts and effectively the career of Harry Potter at Hogwarts whilst Minerva was there. There is so much more to it, lots of little side bits, lots of other curses that she threw and things that she did during the battle, but if I put all those in, we'd be here for like 2 hours. There's just so much that she did. There is a part 3 of this video coming out, which is McGonagall after the war. It's not going to be quite as long, it's just kind of how she continued her life and what happened after the Battle of Hogwarts and after you-know-who was defeated for a second and final time. Do make sure, guys, that you head back for that one. This will be coming out next week. And let me know what you think. You know, McGonagall's an absolute badass, and I think, you know, we should recognise that she really did put everything out there that she had, and all her students were so well protected by her. Like the video if you did, guys. Hit that subscribe so you don't miss out. We've got some great stuff coming out this year, and we'll catch you in the next one.